Welcome back to the After Action Reset. Have you ever noticed that the more exhausted you become, the harder it is to stop thinking? It's a strange paradox. Your body is tired, your eyes are tired, your nervous system is exhausted. You finally crawl into bed after a long day. The house is quiet, the lights are off, everything around you is finally still. And yet your mind decides this is the perfect time to wake up. Suddenly, you're replaying conversations from 3 days ago. You're thinking about bills, you're thinking about work, you're thinking about something your spouse said, you're thinking about a decision you made 5 years ago. You're imagining future problems that haven't even happened yet. You're preparing for conversations that may never occur. And before you know it, 30 minutes turns into an hour turns into two, and you're lying there wondering why your brain won't leave you alone. Most people call this overthinking, but I think we've misunderstood overthinking for a very long time because most people believe overthinking is a thinking problem. I don't. I think it's often a nervous system problem disguised as a thinking problem. And understanding that distinction can completely change how you see yourself. Because if overthinking is simply a thinking problem, the solution seems obvious. Just stop thinking. Just think positive thoughts. Just let go. Just relax. How many times have people said that to you? How about they say, don't worry about it? And if that's a switch you can flip, great. But most people can't. As if your brain hasn't already tried that before in the past. As if you enjoy lying awake at night running mental marathons. We don't. The truth is that people who overthink are often trying harder than anyone else to stop. The problem is that the brain isn't doing what it thinks it's doing. It believes it's helping. Think about that for just a moment. Your brain believes it is helping you. It believes it is protecting you. It believes it's preparing you. It believes it is preventing future pain. That's why overthinking feels so difficult to shut off, because your brain isn't experiencing the activity as harmful. It's experiencing it as survival. If you've ever found yourself replaying the same situation over and over, you're not trying to torture yourself. I get it. Your brain is trying to find certainty. And certainty is one of the most addictive things human beings seek. We want certainty in our finances. We want certainty in our relationships. We want certainty in our careers. We want certainty in our health. And we even want it when we're thinking about our future. But guess what? Life rarely provides it. So the brain starts searching, analyzing, reviewing. It predicts, it prepares. The problem is that uncertainty cannot always be solved through analysis. Sometimes uncertainty is simply part of being human. But the brain doesn't like that answer. The brain wants guarantees. And when it can't find a guarantee, it keeps searching. That's where the loop begins. You replay the conversation. You analyze the decision. You revisit the mistake. You run through every possible outcome. You imagine every possible scenario. You search for the answer that will finally allow you to relax. And because that answer never fully arrives, the cycle continues. What makes this even more frustrating is that overthinking often feels productive. It feels like work. It feels like preparation. It feels like responsibility. Many high-performing people secretly believe that worrying is helping them stay ahead. That anxiety is keeping them sharp. That overthinking is keeping them prepared. I get it. I understand why. For years, I believed the same thing. Many veterans believe this as well. Many first responders believe this. Many parents believe this. Many business owners believe this. And, as I've said before, many caregivers believe this. The mindset sounds something like this. If I think through every possible problem, I will be ready. If I anticipate every possible threat, nothing will catch me off guard. If I stay mentally engaged, I am still in control. Does that sound familiar to anyone? The problem is that preparation and rumination are not the same thing. Preparation has an endpoint. Rumination does not. Preparation says, I've done what I can. Rumination says, keep going. Preparation produces action. Rumination produces exhaustion. Preparation creates clarity. Rumination creates confusion. And many people don't realize they've crossed the line. They think they're preparing when they're actually spinning out of control. The brain starts running circles around itself. The same thoughts, the same fears, the same concerns, the same scenarios again and again. Not because the person is weak. I say that all the time. Not because the person lacks discipline, because they may not. Not because the person is broken, because you are not broken. But because the nervous system has learned to equate thinking with safety. That is one of the most important ideas in this entire episode. The nervous system learns to equate thinking with safety. When that happens, stillness feels dangerous. Silence feels uncomfortable. Rest feels irresponsible. And the moment life becomes quiet, the brain starts searching for something to solve. Anything to solve, actually, because solving feels safer than sitting still. The challenge is that eventually the system becomes trapped. The brain starts scanning for problems even when no immediate problems exist. We talk about this in length in my prior weeks. The person begins living in the future. My most recent short posts have been talking about don't live tomorrow, today. They begin preparing for disasters that haven't happened. They begin fighting battles that exist only inside their imagination. And over time, that creates a tremendous amount of exhaustion. Not necessarily physical exhaustion, but mental exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, nervous system exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that sleep alone cannot fix. Because the issue isn't simply that you're tired. The issue is that your mind never truly powers down. And if you've been caught in that cycle for years, eventually it starts feeling normal. You stop asking why your brain runs this way. You simply assume that's who you are. An overthinker, an anxious person, someone whose mind never completely shuts off. But what if that is not your identity? What if that is a pattern? And what if that pattern can be changed? That's where we're going to next. Because before you can break the overthinking loop, you have to understand why your brain became trapped inside it in the first place. So, how does a person get trapped in the overthinking loop? Usually, it doesn't happen overnight, as I talk about. It happens gradually. A person goes through enough stress, enough pressure, enough uncertainty, enough disappointment, enough responsibility, and eventually the brain begins adapting. It actually starts believing, if I can stay ahead of everything, I can stay safe. That sounds logical at first, but eventually it becomes a prison because the brain stops responding only to real problems. It starts responding to possible problems, potential problems, imagined problems, future problems, things that could happen, things that might happen, things that probably will not happen but still feel threatening enough to analyze. And once the nervous system gets used to that pattern, the mind starts living in anticipation, not presence, anticipation. That is exhausting. A lot of people are not tired because of what happened today. They're tired because they spent the entire day mentally preparing for tomorrow, next week, next month, and the worst case version of every possible outcome. That kind of thinking consumes energy, and a lot of it. And this is where high functioning people often get trapped, because high functioning people are used to carrying responsibility. They are used to solving problems. They're used to being prepared. They're used to staying composed. They're used to thinking ahead. Parents do this all the time. So do first responders, veterans, my military folk, law enforcement officers, business owners, caregivers. People who have lived their entire life under pressure for a long time often become experts at anticipation. They learn to scan, prepare. They learn to notice what other people might miss. And in some environments, that skill is extremely valuable, believe me. In certain professions, anticipation keeps people alive. In parenting, anticipation keeps a household moving or keeps your child safe. In leadership, anticipation prevents problems before they happen. So we need to be clear. The ability to think ahead is not bad in and of itself. The problem begins when the system never shuts off, because a skill that is useful in one context can become destructive when it becomes permanent. That is what happens with overthinking. At first, it feels like responsibility. Then it becomes a habit. Then it becomes an identity or a mask. People start saying, "That's just how I am. I'm just an overthinker. My brain never stops. I can't relax." But many times that is not personality. It's called adaptation. Your system adapted to pressure. Your mind adapted to uncertainty. Your brain learned that if it kept scanning, maybe it could prevent pain. And if that pattern gets repeated long enough, peace can start to feel unfamiliar. This is one of the strangest parts of chronic overthinking. The thing people say they want most is calm. But when they finally get quiet, their brain does not know what to do with that silence. They sit down, the room gets quiet, the phone is put away, there is no immediate crisis, so to speak, and suddenly, instead of relaxing, they feel uncomfortable, restless. Some even feel guilty. How about agitated? Like they should be doing something, solving some sort of problem, fixing something, preparing for something. That is not random. That is the nervous system struggling with stillness. Because if your body has lived in activation for years, calm can feel extremely strange at first. Not necessarily bad, but strange. And strange can feel unsafe. So the brain creates activity. It starts thinking, it starts analyzing, it starts planning ahead, it starts reviewing because mental activity feels more familiar than stillness. That's why some people cannot just sit quietly and enjoy it. They reach for their phone, they turn on the television, they check email, they doom scroll, they look for a task. Not always because they are bored, sometimes they might, but sometimes because stillness exposes the internal noise that they have been avoiding all day, all week, all year. And overthinking becomes a way to avoid feeling powerless. That is another major piece of this. Overthinking often gives people the illusion of control. If I can just think about this long enough, maybe I can control the outcome. If I can predict every scenario, maybe I won't be surprised. If I can prepare for every potential failure, maybe I won't get hurt. If I can analyze every word, maybe I won't be rejected. And if I can replay every mistake, maybe I can prevent it from happening again. That is the promise overthinking makes. It's control, but it rarely delivers control. It usually delivers exhaustion because the mind keeps trying to solve what the body is actually feeling. And that is the critical point. Sometimes overthinking is not about the thought itself. Sometimes the thought is just where the stress lands. The body feels unsafe. The nervous system feels activated. The person feels uneasy. So the brain goes looking for a reason. It grabs onto something. It could be a conversation, a bill, maybe a decision, a relationship, a future concern. And suddenly the person believes that one thing is the problem. But underneath it, the real issue may be activation. The body is already stressed. The mind simply found a subject to attach that stress to. That is why some people solve one worry and then immediately bounce to another. They think, if I can fix just this one thing, I will finally get to relax. But then the moment that issue gets settled, another one magically appears. Because the problem was not only the thought, the problem was the state the nervous system was in. This is why logic alone often fails. You can tell yourself that probably will not happen. I am overreacting. This is not worth worrying about. And intellectually, you may know that that is true, but your body does not feel convinced. And when the body doesn't feel safe, the mind will keep searching. This is where many people become frustrated with themselves. They know better, but they do not feel better. They understand the situation logically, but they cannot stop thinking about it emotionally. Again, that is not weakness. That is the gap between insight and regulation. Insight is when you understand what is happening. Regulation is when your nervous system begins to calm down. You need both of those. Most people try to solve overthinking with more thinking, as I said earlier. That's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. They overthink about why they overthink. They analyze the analysis. They worry about why they worry. They become stressed out about being stressed. And now the loop gets even stronger. The way out usually begins with interrupting the state, not winning the argument inside your head. That might mean movement. It could be walking. It could be breathing slower. It could be writing the thought down, changing your environment, doing one concrete action, talking to someone who's grounded, getting out of the mental loop and back into the physical world. Because overthinking thrives in abstraction, it thrives in the imaginary, it thrives in the unknown. But action brings the brain back to reality. Not perfect action, not dramatic action, just grounded action. One small thing that reminds the nervous system we are here, we are present, we are not in every possible future all at once. And for high functioning people, this can be very hard. I get it. Because they are used to solving everything internally. They do not always ask for help. We oftentimes don't. They don't always slow down. They don't always admit when the pressure is too much. They just think harder. They push harder, prepare harder. But at some point, more analysis becomes part of the problem. This is a line where thinking stops helping and starts draining you. And learning to recognize that line is one of the most important skills a person can develop. Because the goal is not to stop thinking. That's not what I'm saying. The goal is to stop being trapped by thinking. There's a difference. You need your mind. You need planning. You need reflection. You need discernment. But you also need the ability to step out of the loop. To say, I have done what I can for tonight or today. I don't have enough information to solve this problem right now. This thought is not producing clarity anymore. This is rumination, not preparation. That distinction matters because once you can name the loop, you can begin to interrupt it. And that's where we're going to next, because breaking the overthinking loop does not happen by force. It happens by learning how to bring the nervous system back into the present, one small reset at a time. So, if overthinking is not really a thinking problem, and if the nervous system plays a much larger role than most people realize, the obvious question becomes, well, how do you break the loop? How do you stop a mind that refuses to stop? How do you find peace when your thoughts feel louder than everything else around you? The first thing I want you to understand is this. You do not beat overthinking by winning every argument in your head. Most people spend years trying to do exactly that. They argue with thoughts. They debate thoughts. They challenge thoughts. They analyze their thoughts. They fight thoughts. But overthinking is often like quicksand. The harder you struggle, the deeper you sink. Because every time you engage the loop gets stronger. Think about what happens when a thought appears. Maybe it's, what if I lose my job? What if something happens to my family? What if I made the wrong decision? What if I fail? Most people immediately try to answer the question. They begin searching for certainty. But uncertainty is exactly what keeps the loop alive, because there is no perfect answer. There's no perfect guarantee, no perfect reassurance. Life doesn't offer these things. And that's one of the hardest truths for humans' mind. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's one of the hardest truths for the human mind to accept. The future will always contain uncertainty. Always. No amount of thinking changes that. No amount of worry changes that. No amount of preparation changes that. The future remains uncertain. And strangely enough, freedom begins when you stop demanding certainty from life. Think about how much energy gets wasted trying to control things you cannot control. The opinions of other people, maybe, the future, the economy, a medical test result that you might be waiting for, a relationship outcome, a decision someone else is responsible for making. 1,000 things that sit completely outside of your influence, yet people spend enormous amounts of energy trying to mentally manage those things. It's exhausting. Not because you're weak, because you're human. The mind wants guarantees. Life offers probabilities. And learning to live with that reality is one of the great challenges of adulthood. Now, here's something that I've learned. Overthinking is often an attempt to create emotional certainty. Not factual certainty, emotional certainty. You want to feel okay. You want to feel safe. You want to feel settled. You want to feel in control. The problem is that feelings don't always arrive through thinking. Sometimes they arrive through action. Sometimes they arrive through acceptance. Sometimes they arrive through letting go. And sometimes they arrive through doing absolutely nothing at all. Try that one on for size. That sounds counterintuitive, especially to high performers, especially to people who've spent their lives solving problems, the fixers, the doers. But not every problem needs to be solved. Some things just need to be accepted. Some things just need maybe patience. Some things just need time. And some things simply need to be carried for a while without trying to force an answer. That realization changed a lot for me because for years I believed every uncomfortable feeling required a solution. Every worry needed an immediate answer. Every uncertainty needed a plan. Every fear needed to be eliminated. But eventually I learned something. Not every feeling is a problem. Some feelings are simply information. Anxiety, for example, might be information. Fear might be information. Stress could be information. The goal isn't necessarily to erase it. The goal is to understand them. That's a very different relationship that I'm talking about. Instead of saying, how do I get rid of this thought? You begin asking, what is this thought trying to tell me? Instead of, how do I make this feeling disappear or go away or cover it up? You ask, what does this feeling need? And sometimes the answer is surprisingly simple. Maybe you need rest. Maybe you need connection. Maybe you need movement. Maybe you need sunlight. Maybe you need sleep. Maybe you need to stop consuming information for a few hours. In other words, put the phone down. Maybe you need a conversation with a trusted, grounded friend. Maybe you need to stop carrying everything by yourself, if that is possible. Because here's another thing people rarely discuss. A lot of overthinking happens in isolation. The loop gets stronger when it stays trapped inside of your own head. Does anyone ever notice that? You think about something for 3 days, then you finally talk to someone, and within 10 minutes they say something that completely changes your perspective. Not because they're necessarily smarter, not because they solved your problem, because they interrupted the loop. Sometimes what the brain needs isn't another answer. It's maybe another perspective. That's why connection matters. That's why community matters. That's why healthy relationships matter. Not because other people can solve all your problems, because they can't. Because they help keep you grounded in reality. We talk about being present. And reality is where overthinking begins to lose its power. Reality says this is what's happening right here, right now. Not what might happen, not what could happen, not what you're imagining. What's happening right now? That question alone can be incredibly powerful. What is actually happening right now? No, right now. Not tomorrow, right now. Not next month, not next year, not 6 years from now. Right now. Does everyone get it? Right now. Most of the time, the answer is surprisingly manageable, but the brain rarely lives in the right now. The brain loves yesterday and tomorrow. It loves regret. It loves prediction. It loves to replay thoughts and things. It loves anticipation, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But peace usually lives in the present. And that's why so many people struggle to find it. They're searching everywhere except the only place it exists, the present moment. Now, let me be clear. This isn't about becoming passive. That's not what I'm saying. It's not about ignoring problems. It's not about pretending life is easy, because it's not. Life is incredibly complex at times. It's very hard. Responsibilities are real, bills are real, relationships are complicated, stress exists everywhere. But there's a difference between carrying a responsibility and mentally living inside it. One is necessary, the other is exhausting. And that's where so many people get stuck. They're carrying tomorrow all day long. They're carrying next year all day long. They're carrying problems that haven't even happened yet. And eventually they become exhausted by possibilities, not realities. That's one of the biggest lessons I hope people take from this episode. Many of us are not tired because of what happened. We're tired because of what we're imagining. And imagination is powerful. Powerful enough to create fear, powerful enough to create stress, powerful enough to keep you awake at night, but also powerful enough to create hope, perspective, healing, growth. The same mind that creates the loop can also learn a new pattern. That's the good news, because patterns are learned over time. And what is learned can be relearned. What is practiced can be changed. What is reinforced can be redirected. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually, one interruption at a time, one moment of awareness at a time, one decision to return to the present at a time. That's what recovery looks like. Not perfection, practice. And if you've spent years trapped in overthinking, I want you to hear this. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not failing. Your nervous system may simply be doing exactly what it learned to do. The good news is that what it has learned, it can be changed. And that process starts with awareness. It starts with recognizing the loop, naming the loop, understanding the loop, and then gently stepping outside of it again and again, over and over, until eventually the mind learns something new. That safety doesn't come from endless thinking. Safety comes from presence, from connection, from recovery, from learning that you don't have to solve your entire life before you can rest. Before we close, I want to remind you that if this episode resonated with you, download my free guide. You're not lazy, you're overloaded. It's completely free through my Beacons link and was created specifically for people who feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and stuck in survival mode. And if you found value in today's conversation, subscribe to the After Action Reset over on YouTube, Spotify, all the podcasts. I'm up and running on all of them. Share this episode with someone whose mind never seems to shut off, because chances are they're not broken either. They're just carrying more than they realize. And they need to hear that they're not alone. Until next time, remember, not every thought deserves your attention. Not every fear deserves your energy. And not every problem needs to be solved tonight. I'll see you on the next one.